Chapter 8. Anders froze, resembling a lizard, stopped in its tracks, as though face to face with a king cobra. His eyes widened, giving him the expression of an alerted owl. A muddy-faced owl. He felt a fluttering in his stomach, felt his scalp prickle and his forehead burn. He'd gone all feeble, all doughy, and in that moment, he couldn't pick himself up from the floor.
"It sure is a Sasquatch,"
a scrawny old man said, appearing suddenly, staggering along one of the pub balconies and zipping up his worn green pants.
"I'm into this," he added. "Have I missed much?"
Then his attention turned elsewhere. To his left, to the cafe where a blonde woman screamed from the passenger side of her boyfriend's red sports car. The roof was down, and she stood holding her hands top of her head, bouncing her heels on the expensive-looking leather seats.
"Someone's shut that bitch up," he yelled,
showing a brown tooth.
"I'm getting into this. Shut her up."
But she screamed again, and the old man's crinkled up and sun-scorched forehead began to twitch.
"Sammy!"
she screamed.
"Sammy! Get out here now!"
Sammy, who she turned to with a scolding look of frustration, watched him eat greedily behind the cafe window, got up and came to the doorway. He was a beefy man with arms like weapons of mass destruction, and an exaggerated chin like some comic book hero. He looked slightly lost as he ran a napkin over his face and nodded while she thrust her arm out, pointing at Anders. Again he nodded and stared at her. Then he peered through the cafe window at his breakfast box, at his meaty burrito and selection of sides, and his pulped avocados, diced onions, mustard sauce, and daddy-sized dose of scrambled eggs.
"My brekkie,"
he whispered, slowly, gloomily.
"Forget that, Sammy," she said. "You got a job to do."
"But I need my protein, baby. Come on, I need my protein." He passed the napkin nervously between both hands, looking fresh from a morning gym session, his red t-shirt covered with sweat patches.
"He'll move on soon, baby. Come on now." "I don't care, Sammy," she said. "You go after him," she said. "But babe..."
He felt his cube-shaped head, flattening his spiky hair with his fingers. She beat the car horn. She threw her hands in the air. With his head down, he began moving sullenly from the doorway. Then, squeezing his napkin in his hand, he set off. The school kids cheered as he crossed the road, big shoulders moving, muscular thighs showing from his short shorts as he weaved through the traffic. The ponytailed man lit another cigarette, shifting his eyes between Anders and Sammy. Passengers hung from car windows laughing and yelling, horns beeped, engines revved. Some folks, one or two in cowboy hats, stepped from pub doorways with their eyes on the dirt path. Glass of morning beer in hand, and on the dirt path was a man being dragged along by his German shepherd, sniffing its way towards Anders. Sammy was smiling now. He broke into a slow jog, raising his arms to the cheering kids, lapping it up like an athlete entering a grand stadium on Cup final day. The race would soon be on, Anders thought, and he got ready to move. He knew he had to be first, to be at the gate before Big Sammy. He stood with his penis showing. There was more laughter, more cheers. The old man with the brown tooth jumped up and down, was eating mashed beans from a mess tin, shoveling them into his mouth with a long wooden spoon. He poured a drop of bourbon over the beans, tilted the tin and sipped from one corner.
"What am I missing?"
He ran from one end of the balcony to the other.
"Where's he gone?"
Sammy strode onto the dirt path. He walked towards Anders, with his chest puffed out, waving now and then to the bus stop kids.
"Get him, Sammy,"
the blonde said. He responded by showing his thumb, tilting his chin, smiling a smile that could be mistaken for arrogance if the rest of his face didn't appear so stupid and clueless. She slapped the steering wheel and pointed to Anders, now shifting behind him, running faster than he had ever run before. His eyes focused only on the gate, and his bare feet flicking up dirt. Sammy had removed his t-shirt, rubbed his brow with it, and kept smiling. The bus stop kids cheered. He smiled and the cheers went up another notch. Then he did one press-up. Again they cheered for Big Sammy. He did another one, then another. Again, more cheers. Finally, he set off in pursuit of Anders. Anders kept going for the gate. It was becoming a fuzzy blur to him now. He blinked sweat from his eyes and adjusted his spectacles. Focus cleared, seeing the gate as a gate again. He kept on pushing himself, focused, ignoring the pain in his feet and not daring to look back. Run, run, running, heart pounding, gentle swinging. But suddenly, the smell of onions and hot breath was over him. Sammy's large shadow now looming. Anders kept pushing himself forward. Never had he moved so fast, and under different circumstances, he might have taken a moment to be impressed with himself. Nearly there, he thought. Just a few more strides.
Sammy, you better run!
The blonde's voice was continuous.
Or that's it!
She was leaning over the car, feeling her breasts.
There'll be no more of this for Sammy!
Sammy watched them bounce in her hands. His teeth showed. He wore an insatiable expression. His eyes swelled. His jaw then clenched. It was an expression he held as he ran, and one he continued to hold as he tripped over a tree root, arms stretched out, skidding face down on the dirt.
Up, Sammy!
The blonde said, stepping away from the car, her heels scratching viciously on the pavement as she walked around it.
Beep beep! Get up now! He's escaping!
She pressed the car horn. She screamed,
Beep beep! After him now!
Jesus! Sammy stood, rubbing his dirtied hands on his thighs. Jesus! He said again. Then he looked at her. The cheers were now laughter as Anders clattered into the gate. Thankful that the big shadow and hot breath were no longer behind him, he looked up, realizing the gate was much bigger now face to face with it. He pushed it and nothing gave. It was solid and locked on both sides. He pushed again with his shoulder. Nothing. He jumped high and gripped the top with his limp, floppy arms, struggling to lift his own weight, hands cut and bleeding. He dropped. He leaned on the wood, breathing heavily, eyes closed. Meanwhile, across the road, on his balcony, now stooping, holding binoculars and turning mechanically left to right, up and down, was the brown-toothed old man. "He's at the gate," he said, lowering the binoculars, wetting his tongue with bourbon and grinning with mashed beans on his gums, and of course, that one brown tooth. Again he looked through the binoculars. "I see now," he said. "I see what I've been missing." He picked up his beans and topped them up with bourbon. Then suddenly, he was fist-pumping the air, fist-pumping and yelling, "Aussie rules!" and then leaning on the balcony edge, pecking the wooden beam with his singular tooth. He took some beans and took some bourbon. He then performed an Irish jig in his open dressing gown. "This is good stuff," he said. "I'm into this." Anders was on one knee. He got up now and tried again, lifting his foot into a deep horseshoe mark in the wood. It took his weight while he pulled himself higher, managing to curve an arm onto the other side. He rested there, shoulder digging into the wood, taking splinters, taking his weight. Then he swung a leg over. Ooh! People covered their eyes as his legs parted. "Drumstick!" the old man yelled, lowering his binoculars. "Don't let him snare you that way. That's a drumstick he's showing you." He rubbed his red blotchy nose with his fingers. "Go, big fella," he said. "Go after him, and don't let him snare you that way. He's using tactics." Sammy smiled at the bus stop kids. He held it long, held it until his jaw vibrated. Then he swaggered over to the gate, taking his time and nodding as the cheers began again. With one hand over his six-pack, he paused now and then, pretending to be out of breath and tired. "Get him!" the blonde screamed. "I'm in agreement with the hooker," the old man yelled. "This is a contact sport. Go full chicken wing on that weasel." He sat on a stool and then stood again. He kept standing and sitting, eating beans and drinking bourbon. He saluted Sammy. Then he turned to the blonde and saluted her. "Aussie rules," he said. "What a man lives for." Anders hung on, panting heavily, like a dog with a thirst on a hot day. Hair wet and muddy pasted across his forehead. His arms and legs were either side of the gate. He wanted to swing over, but he felt drained. For now, he just dangled there, looking spent. Sammy arrived, taking Anders by the ankle, tugging it, holding it up to the crowd, grinning as Anders struggled to hold on. There was only laughter now, no more cheering. Sammy's smile faded. He glanced towards his car to see the blonde keying numbers into her mobile phone. He raised one arm, nothing. He flexed his six-pack, nothing.
I want action, the old man yelled. You can bask in your glory later, you big cunt. Now fix that chicken wing. He pinched grey curls of hair on his chest, twisting them with his fingers. Yes, yes, get him! Sammy tugged again. Anders leaned one way, arching as much weight as possible to the other side of the gate. Both resembled a pair of wrestlers dueling in a steel cage match, and the resilience of Anders seemed to change the crowd's attitude. Ponytail stamped on his cigarette, curved a hand over his top lip and began booing. Let him go, you muscle-clad jock, one voice said. Yeah, you're twice his size, said another from the street below the old man's balcony. That's plenty down there, the old man said, leaning over his wooden beam, his thick eyebrows and bald head giving him the appearance of a prehistoric bird. I'm into this. This is good stuff. He thrust the bottle out, pointing his forefinger towards Sammy and Anders. Good stuff, I said. He poured bourbon into his mouth and then turned the bottle, bringing the label close to his eyes. This is good stuff too. Go take your weekly shit, old man, someone shouted without looking up, thumbs hooked inside their belt, staring forward. The old man ignored him. He laughed, he put down the bourbon and rubbed both hands together. We're coming to a good bit, he said. Now, how about that chicken wing? I want him pissing in the dirt. You hear me? Pissing. He snared you and he snared me, and I can't let that go. I won't. Traffic moved on. A bus pulled up on the street curb, and Sammy's fans, the bus stop kids, slowly and reluctantly boarded it, while the girl in the turtleneck sweater watched them leave. The blonde also made her move, marching off down an alleyway swinging her handbag. Two waitresses stacked empty cups outside the cafe, watching her dramatic exit. Then the man with the German Shepherd appeared. Again he staggered past, tugging the dog's lead as it pounced at Anders for another sniff. There was no cheering now, no laughter, just boos and protest towards Sammy's treatment of Anders. Let the poor bastard go, Ponytail yelled, tapping out another cigarette from its pack. Sammy kicked the gate. It wobbled, but Anders clung on. He scrunched his eyes, felt the sandpaper-like wood chafing his groin. Why don't you climb down? Sammy said to him. I got you. It's over. Climb down. Anders twisted his foot, trying to pull away from Sammy's grip, but nothing gave. He tried again, this time dragging his foot across Sammy's face as he spoke, rubbing it back and forth over his lips, muffling his words. Come down from up there. Sammy spat dirt as he spoke. Come down, I said. He rubbed his lips on his shoulder. Come down. He spat again. Come down now. People began cheering for Anders. Sammy looked across the road at them. His face was crumpled, his upper lip twitching, coming high to show big white teeth. Now with both hands on the ankle, Sammy was tugging again, and rocking the gate. Tears sprang to Anders' eyes. Wood tore into his armpit, chest and groin. He moved slightly, seeking comfort, and seeing opportunity, Sammy yanked him completely away from the gate. Anders was loose now, loose and falling backwards, with the sun blinding his eyes. Boo! People protested as he hit the deck, body vanishing in a mist of powdery dirt. The booing continued. Everyone seemed disappointed that the underdog had been caught, all apart from the old man on the balcony. He leaned with his chest on the edge of the wooden beam, his perch. He spat beans. He swore. A man below took off his cowboy hat. Beans instantly splattered his forehead. Behave down there, the old man yelled. That was a fair takedown. This is Aussie rules, and that means full contact. He sniffed. He looked around. After him, he said, seeing through his binoculars that Anders was crawling back towards the bushes. After him, you dopey square-headed tool. He waved his mess tin, took a few beans. There were more boos as Sammy walked slowly behind Anders, then suddenly launched himself through the air like a missile, directing his muscular shoulder into Anders' back. Anders felt pain from head to toe. He felt his spine vibrating, his teeth and jaw locked. Now he was pinned. Sammy was over him, digging an uncompromising knee into his kidney. Good work, the old man said. Now there's still time for that chicken wing. He looked ready to say more when a brick struck him between the eyes. For a moment he rocked, bottle turning in his hand, liquor spilling on the decking.
He staggered back, swaying, moving heel-toe, then forward to collapse across his perch. A trickle of blood marked his brow. His eyes had crisscrossed in opposite directions. "A little help," he wheezed, slowly, but nobody paid any attention. Anders was fighting back. He kicked out and pushed off the ground. An astonishing amount of dust rose around them, and both coughed while Sammy got back on top, cupping his hand over Anders' mouth, digging his knee further into his kidney. Anders gagged, crying into Sammy's wet fingers. "Your hands smell," he said. "Get off me!" He turned his face away from the rancid, fishy smell, vomiting face down in the dirt. When he looked up again, Sammy was being dragged away by two men in Stetson hats with gloved hands. Suddenly, Anders was being dragged away too.